Welcome to Jen Rubin's Green Room. I'm Jen Rubin from the Washington Post, also an MSNBC contributor and author of the book, How Women Saved Democracy from Donald Trump. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This program, I hope, will become a standard part of your listening catalog. We're going to bring in the smartest people in Washington and beyond. We're going to have those kind of conversations that I and my friends around town used to have in a physical green room, those little waiting pins that they put you in before you go on for a TV hit. But they're sometimes the best, the juiciest part of the week. And I want to have you put this mental image in your mind. There's a knock at the door. I and one of my guests appear. We come in. I pour you a glass of wine. I pour us a glass of wine, and we all settle in. And you just get to listen to a conversation I'm having with a really smart person. And we're going to talk about a lot of subjects that, frankly, don't lend themselves to a soundbite, don't lend themselves even to a column. Have some hard conversations about race, religion, but we're also going to have a lot of fun. And there's no better person to start off the program than George Conway, who is one of the funniest, one of the smartest people in Washington. I am delighted this week to have with me George Conway. George has probably become a familiar face and voice to those of you who follow the daily news, but he had a whole career before becoming such a media rock star. He went to Harvard University, graduated
media
from
rock
Yale.
Star? No.
Graduated from Yale Law School. Clerked for a very important Second Circuit judge, Ralph Winter, who is renowned in many circles. Became a partner in a prominent firm, actually helped defend or prosecute, rather, Paula Jones' lawsuit against Bill Clinton. He's argued a case before the Supreme Court, has a perfect record before the Supreme Court of 1-0.
Yeah, you got to quit while you're ahead. That's really the key to that.
Exactly. And now he is here. He has the distinction of providing great legal commentary, and he is also the person who put E. Jean Carroll in touch with Robbie Kaplan, who is her extraordinary counsel.
I will say this, I don't toot my horn that much, but that is the best thing I ever did, not winning the Supreme Court case.
So how did you meet Jean, and what about Robbie, who is a fabulous lawyer, of course, led you to believe that they would be a good match?
I had gotten to know Robbie, I think a couple of years before, 2017, 2018, we had lunch for the first time, or I don't remember when. I don't remember, maybe it was probably 2018, is whenever she brought that Ponzi scheme case, ACN, against Trump. And I read the complaint. And I knew about the Kaplan Hecker firm, her law firm, and I knew about her, because she was a Paul Weiss partner, and there she won the Defense of Marriage Act case for Edie Windsor. And she's just a spectacular lawyer with an excellent reputation and a great person. Even though I'm sure we could find 50 policy things to disagree on, we became very good friends. But anyway, that just was the background. And then one day, this story comes out with Jean, the excerpt from Jean's book. It was, I think, a Thursday or a Friday of some week in 2019, and Trump goes crazy and accuses her of being a liar. And it occurred to me that weekend, and I think I might have been influenced in part by a thread that I saw that a very smart woman in Massachusetts tweeted, when she tweeted like basically all 26 stories about all of the Trump sex victims. And I started reading through it. And it really struck me amazingly for the first time. I knew they were all out there, but I never really kind of read through what they were all saying. And it struck me that, the parallels were just stunning.
Stunning, yeah.
And that sort of, and I was ginned up about that, and I was ginned up about the fact that the Republicans were just like treating it as nothing. Not even the Times, like I think originally treated it as seriously as they should have. And I thought of the Juanita Broderick case.
Exactly.
And I remembered facts from the Juanita Broderick case because I knew about that case because I had, helped, as you noted, provided assistance to Paula Jones. So I kind of knew about all the different allegations that claimed.
She was, by the way, a woman who accused Bill Clinton of essentially having raped her.
Raped her in a motel room in some small town in Arkansas. I don't remember the details, but there were wrinkles to her story. She retracted it at one point, and then she had it back, and there weren't any contemporaneous. I don't think there were any contemporaneous complaints to anybody like we've seen with the Me Too thing. But, it was a serious, I always took it as a serious accusation. Republicans took it as a serious accusation. And in fact, in the midst of the 2016 campaign, there was a debate where, you may recall, beforehand, I think it was right after the Billy Bush tape came out, Steve Bannon's brilliant idea was to fight back by reminding everybody, I'm being sarcastic there when I say brilliant idea, so fight back by, making everybody recall how Hillary's husband had been accused of various things. And I think they tried to trot out Paula Jones, or maybe they did. They trotted out somebody else. They trotted out this woman, Juanita Broderick, who had accused Clinton of rape. Anyway, fast forward to 2019, and that weekend after the Jean story came out in the New Yorker, it was a chapter from her book, and it struck me that if you lined up the two stories, they were similar, except that Jean Carroll was consistent. She had never retracted it. And in addition, you had a videotaped admission, which you didn't have with Bill Clinton, where Trump says, he likes to grab women by the you-know-what. And you had that, and then you had a much, much larger pattern of similar conduct, which is actually admissible, as we saw at this recent trial under Rule 415 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, which allow plaintiffs alleging sexual violence or prosecutors alleging sexual violence to go and basically present other instances where the defendant behaved similarly. And I basically wrote this piece in the Washington. I was originally going to make it a Twitter thread, and then I mentioned it to somebody about what I was writing. I was going to do Twitter thread Broderick versus Carroll, and then my friend said, "You should make this an op-ed." So I emailed the Post on a Saturday. I don't forget which editor. It might have been Fred Hyatt, might have been Ruth Marcus, it might have been Karen Tumulty. I don't remember. And they said, and I said, "This is what I want to write." And they said, "Yeah, we'll publish that."
That sounds good. That sounds like people would be interested.
Yeah, we think we publish that. And literally, while I was sitting, my son and his two friends were at this football mini camp that the Philadelphia Eagles hold during the summer every day. So I'm sitting there in the Philadelphia Eagles field house on my butt on a sideline with an iPad, just typing this out. It took me like an hour or two, and I sent it to the Post, and the Post published it. And so the next week, I was in New York, and I was invited to a small dinner party at Molly Jong Fast's house. I don't know if you've ever been to one of those parties. They're very interesting. She always has very interesting a mix of people there. It's always sort of, you never know who's going to be there. And lo and behold, E. Jean Carroll is there. And she had seen, obviously, my op-ed, and she thanked me for it, I think. And then she said something about the possibility of suing, that some people were suggesting it, or that she had been kicking it around. And what did I think? And, this was in the middle of a cocktail party, so other people were kind of listening. I mean, it wasn't like a secret attorney-client privilege, come to your office kind of thing. And I kind of thought for a second, less than a second, maybe just a quarter of a second, and I said, "You have a claim." And the claim, and she goes, what, she asked me, and I said, "Look, the criminal statute or the civil statute, the criminal statute or the civil statute for rape or assault has long passed, but he called you a liar. You have a civil defamation claim. If you prove that, this happened to you, then his calling you a liar is defamatory, and you have a lawsuit." And And she took that in, and then I thought at the moment, I said, I think I know the right lawyer for you. I don't know whether I mentioned Robbie then, but when I got home or the next day, I mean, I contacted Robbie and said, hey, Jean Carroll is looking for a lawyer, in substance, and Robbie expressed interest, so I somehow hooked them up together. I don't know whether it was on a text or an email or like that, and the rest is kind of history. And that's basically how it happened. And then it became an issue at trial because the Trump people kept trying to portray me as the center of, or me and Robbie and the litigation funder. As, in fact, at one point I heard they were suspicious that I was the litigation funder, which is I mean, which I would have been happy to chip in actually, but nobody asked me. So that's how it all happened. And then Robbie apparently, I gather, had lunch with. Oh, and then the next thing that happened, which I would have put in the op-ed, I don't think I knew about it, was, they were, the New York Times playing catch up the next week, interviewed Lisa Birnbach and Carroll Martin, and I listened to the tape. It's like, oh, this is a potential slam dunk.
And these were two women who had
basically, she had told, basically contemporaneously within a day or two. And one person advised her, Lisa Birnbach, said, you must go to the police, you were raped. And the other one said, no, don't go to the police. He will destroy you because he's got so many lawyers and he's so rich, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, Jean just zipped it up, kept her mouth shut because of the advice of Carroll Martin. And, and the fact that they gave her different advice and that they're totally different people and they testified was very, very compelling, apparently, on the stand.
And that's what struck me about the lawsuit. It wasn't all neat. Life isn't neat. It isn't clear. People's memory, particularly in a traumatic situation, is spotty at best. Yeah. And if you were going to make up a story, you'd make up one that sounded a lot more airtight than the one that really happened. Because
although she was very, that being said, it was airtight in the sense that she told people, and she was absolutely emphatic about, description about the digital penetration that he engaged in.
Exactly.
And that's what led to the sexual abuse verdict, and that followed with $2 million in damages, and it also meant that he libeled her because he said she was lying that they never met, and that was another $3 million, and there's more coming with that.
And as another esteemed lawyer turned journalist, Dahlia Litvak, said, he is now an adjudicated liar.
And an adjudicated sexual abuser as well.
Exactly. Unfortunately,
so I'm thinking of a new, every so often I come up with these abbreviations or acronyms for him. And there's like twice impeached POTUS, like Tim POTUS, or twice impeached and indicted, and now, and then now I can add in adjudicated sexual abuser. So it's like TIMIASA POTUS.
It's getting long. It's getting
very long. I don't know. I'm going to run out of Twitter characters.
Exactly.
And a couple of convictions. We're going to add one in for the incarceration. It's
exactly. And we will get to those. Let me just say that the trial was such a demonstration of the difference between a great lawyer and a terrible lawyer. Yeah. You could tell how well prepared Jean was, how Robbie had thought through meticulously her lines of questioning. She was, I think, quick to get in some evidence that she didn't think was going to be able to be submitted, but she got that in from an expert witness. But she was everything you would expect her to be. Mm-hmm. Hugely prepared. Her colleagues who helped her try the case were superb. They were superb. And she drew a great judge who happens to have the same last name, not related to her, who was not interested in many of the shenanigans.
No, and he was the perfect judge for this, just a no-nonsense, off-the-chart smart, as smart a federal judge as you're going to get, and not mean, not gratuitously mean, but just he doesn't take any guff. It's like you cannot pull BS in his courtroom. He will call you on it, and he will stop you.
What other judge would quote Jonathan Swift? You know, he picked up on.
Well, there've been a lot of literate federal judges.
Well, fair enough. But on the other side, his counsel, I thought, played right into her hands because he was badgering. He was incredulous that she didn't scream at the time. He was rude.
Yeah.
You was
have
pestering.
to be. You have to. Look, I mean, I've never cross-examined. I've never a prosecutor, and I've never been a defense lawyer for a sexual abuser. But you have to be. There's a way to do it. Okay, there are points that you can score without being obnoxious. And he did score some of those points. Basically, well, you say that he was pushed up against you. You couldn't see what was happening down below. And that's how I think the jury came about, its finding that there wasn't a rape under New York law, which requires penile penetration. And there was uncertainty there, and she was hurt. But again, that goes to what your point was about warts and all. She didn't embellish. She knew she was certain that he quote unquote rummaged around and with his hands. I mean, it's just a horrible thing to read, even in cold print, and that it was painful. But she didn't exaggerate and say, oh, I was absolutely certain, of this and that, when she was less certain. And that certainly added credibility. That and the fact that he didn't testify, and the fact that basically in order to accept his version of events and to accept and to conclude that she hadn't proved her case by a preponderance of evidence, you would have had to conclude that essentially 11 people, as Robbie puts it, were lying. Everybody from the people at Bergdorf's who said, oh yeah, you could walk right in there and so on, and to the Carroll Martin and the Lisa Birnbach, who were the contemporaneous witnesses who heard the account immediately after it happened, which is very, very powerful evidence, both journalistically, as we've seen with the Me Too reporting, but it's also very, very important evidence in litigation. When somebody says something immediately, doesn't have time to really, they're not making up, and it's not, and it happened in 1996. So this isn't some concocted thing that was concocted 20 years later. I mean, he wasn't even, I don't even know if he was a Republican then. And he certainly wasn't running for president.
Sure.
He was probably still giving money to Hillary.
But isn't that typical of Trump, that everyone else is the liar? His
Correct.
version of reality.
Well, that's his problem.
Is right.
Right. That's the problem. And everybody has to be lying. Everybody is lying except for him. And that's the reason why he couldn't be brought to the courtroom, because it would take, Robbie didn't have to do this at the deposition because you don't need to. At the deposition, you're trying to get out what his story is. But there would be freestanding cross-examinations that you could do in a courtroom in front of a judge like Kaplan, who is not going to let the witness weasel away. Like basically, okay, so all these people make accusations against you, and they're all lying. Everyone who says anything bad about you is lying, right? And what's he going to say?
Right.
He's going to say, yes. And then he looks ridiculous. And you can even go, there are things you could cross-examine on. Like one time he told Leslie Stahl, and she could deny, he'll deny he said it, but he once told Leslie Stahl that the reason why he says things about the media, that they're fake news, is so that no one will believe them when they report something about him. I mean, that's his MO.
That's his MO, yeah.
And that's why he can't, and he's got, he can never take the stand in his own defense. It would be insane. In fact, if you go back to the first Woodward book about Trump, I forget which one it was, Fear, True, I forget which one it was. The first one, where he's describing the Mueller investigation, and there's apparently just this excerpt in there from, which must have been from an interview between him and either Jim Dowd, the lawyer to Trump, the personal lawyer to Trump, or somebody very close to Dowd, where Dowd is going through all the reasons why he, in his own mind, why he couldn't put Donald Trump on the witness stand. And the last point was, the book ends with this quote essentially, is because Trump is a fucking liar.
Yeah.
And that's literally the words, the closing words of the book.
And that's the lawyer. That's his own
funny.
lawyer.
Well, yeah, no, actually, and it dovetails with something that once happened to me. It was a memorial reception for a very prominent New York lawyer, and I ran into another lawyer there who had previously represented Donald Trump in various litigations, and he told me that there was no, this was in 2017, 2018, that there was no way that Trump could be allowed to even speak to Bob Mueller and his people, even, with under oath, not under oath, interview, not deposition, grand jury, in no way could he be allowed to make statements to them because, quote unquote, this was the lawyers, he'll fucking lie his ass off. Lie his fucking ass off. I can't remember. It was I don't know where the gerund was, but it was essentially that. And, that's why, it also dovetails why with what happened the last weekend of the trial when they rested their case, the Trump people. And that means, okay, you're not putting on any witnesses, including Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump over the weekend says, I'm coming to New York and I'm going to testify. And then the judge said, right, this was on that Friday, and the judge says, well, what's going on here? You close your case. Well, he's saying he's going to testify, and his lawyers told the judge, apparently, we will quit if he shows up.
That's a great little tidbit, George.
It's amazing.
That is a great little tidbit. And that endemic lying, that pathological lying, brings us to the psyche of Donald Trump. In 2019, you wrote a piece for Atlantic Magazine, Unfit for Office. That was, I think, the first very detailed, very substantive probe of why Donald Trump is not mentally well and not mentally fit for office.
I wouldn't say that it was the first. I mean, there was a lot written by psychiatrists who were willing to chance a violation of the so-called Goldwater rule. And they had said a lot. And then there was this book written by a friend of mine, Dr. Frank, a Harvard-trained psychiatrist who just wrote this brilliant book about Trump on the couch. And, I had a lot of, and then I had been reading, the first time I really I knew there was something wrong with the guy in 2017. I said, this guy is fucked up in some way.
And what was it that first led you to believe that? That he wasn't just evil, but he was not all there?
He was not all there and evil. I didn't assume he was evil. I just assumed, look, the guy's, he was a randy guy. He's a wise ass. He's a pompous guy, and so lots of politicians are like that. But, he gets elected to the presidency of the United States. My belief, I projected positive attributes to him in the way that he and other narcissists and psychopaths project negative characteristics onto other people. And I just said, the guy has done all this stuff. Now he's president of the United States. He's going to end up having to take direction and he wants to be a good president and he'll grow. And there'll be those moments where he says something whacked out and you're just going to have to cringe a little. But all in all, he'll appreciate that he's involved in an enterprise greater than himself on behalf of the country, on behalf of its people, on behalf of its Constitution. And, he won't be the perfect president, but he's got to understand that in order to be perceived as a good president, he has to basically act like a president.
And that was beyond him.
And that was absolutely so. That was delusion. That was pure delusion on my part, and I kind of realized that really quickly, which is the reason why I ended up withdrawing my name from consideration for being. I was going to be nominated to become the Assistant Attorney General for the civil division in the Department of Justice, which is essentially the world's largest law firm. Well, it's funny because... Can you imagine
having taken that position and been in the position?
The day I started to realize after he fired Comey and started saying crazy stuff and people were saying he was all ranting and raving about Russia, I started thinking, this is just he has no idea what he's doing, and he's going to get himself into trouble. And one day, like the next week, and I had started thinking about withdrawing, and I had, the FBI check was done, but I hadn't filled out the financial disclosure forms, and I was foot dragging on it because I was having second doubts.
Yeah.
And one day I drive home from my office in New York, because I was still up in New York and New Jersey with our 4 kids, and Kellyanne was down, living in an apartment downtown DC and going to the White House every day. I was about to cross the GW Bridge from the Henry Hudson Parkway. I had the WCBS News Radio 880 on, and there was a breaking news alert. And the breaking news alert was that Rod Rosenstein had appointed Bob Mueller to be special counsel. And so I'm driving across the bridge, and I'm starting to do, the wheels are turning.
Yes.
This man, by the end of the bridge, I concluded, this man is going to be at war with the department that I would be joining if I joined it. And he's going to be at war with that department for the next 2 or 3 years. And this isn't going to work. Okay?
Thank goodness that was on rather than classical music that you were.
No, I was.
Otherwise,
I was listening. Well, thank goodness for New York City traffic, because I was listening to 880 to find out whether there was a backup at the bridge. But and that's basically. And I at that point. So at that point, it was like, there's something wrong with this guy. I don't know what it is. And finally, I don't remember when I read it, but there was an article that year in 2017 in Rolling Stone magazine by a very good writer whose name escapes me now. But basically, she wrote this very interesting article on whether or not Trump has narcissistic personality disorder. And she went through the, I don't know how many others there, 8 or 9
characteristics, factors.
Characteristics, or the diagnostic criteria is what you call it, for narcissistic personality disorder. You only have to have 5 of them. And it was like, check, 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 check. And all of a sudden the light bulb went on. And I bought a copy and I started reading more about what mental health professionals had said. I bought a copy of the DSM-5 and saw, Jesus, this is really it.
Classic case.
A classic case. And, there was so much more evidence just piling up of his extreme narcissism. And also I was starting to look, I looked at, there's another cluster B personality disorder called antisocial personality disorder, which is sociopathy. I started concluding he may be a sociopath too. Now there's absolutely no doubt after January 6th and the 2 impeachments and all the sexual assault allegations and what he's been saying last week about. There's no question he is an absolute sociopath. He is a narcissistic sociopath. But anyway, I got the idea of writing, doing a reprise on the elements of narcissistic personality disorder to basically show that this man is such a pathological narcissist, he cannot comply with his oath of office, which is when you're a federal official or you're any kind of official and you take an oath to defend the Constitution or the laws of the United States or the laws of your state or the whatever, you are basically a fiduciary. You are holding this office and using its powers on behalf of people other than yourself. And a narcissist, a true pathological narcissist, and we've had many narcissistic presidents, to be sure, but at the end of the day, someone who's pathological, basically can't act in the best interest of other people. They just can't. They don't care. They only care about themselves. And that was Donald Trump. And that's why we saw all the things. Once you understand that, Donald Trump makes perfect sense. Every crazy thing he does,
exactly,
from lying about E. Jean Carroll to fomenting an insurrection, everything makes perfect sense.
And what distinguishes Trump, I think, from people who are just egotists, and let's face it, you have to be an egotist to run for president, is that he really does not understand that other people have feelings or concerns or that he should be concerned with them. The only thing that matters is this insatiable need to fortify himself.
Correct. And that's an essential component of narcissism, is a lack of empathy. I mean, this is the guy who, there are trivial examples of this. This is the guy who said that he told a 7-year-old on the phone when they were making, he and Melania were taking calls from
Christmas,
from kids for calling for Christmas. He goes, "So do you believe in Santa Claus?" It's like, it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Or something like that to the two, like a little kid. I'm just like, what are you doing? And throwing the paper towels. And then remember the time that there was this woman who basically lost her entire, she was Kurdish, I think, and she lost her entire family. And he's like asking, well, how did you win a Nobel Prize? And she says, basically, they killed my family. And he goes, what? And then he forgets that she just said they killed her family, and then he has to be reminded of it like 30 seconds later. Just goes right past him. It doesn't mean anything to him. None of it means anything to him, and that's narcissism. But then what's worse is if you're so if you are that extreme a narcissist, you ultimately become like a malignant narcissist, which is a combination of narcissism and sociopathy with a little Machiavellianism and paranoia thrown in, but let's leave that out for the second. And one of the key elements of sociopathy is, apart from not being able to tell the truth and continually lying and using aliases, which he's done numerous times, is basically having no capacity for remorse, none. So not only lacks empathy, he has no capacity for remorse, which is exemplified by the fact that even though he apologized for the Billy Bush tape, he then was like weeks later telling people that the Billy Bush tape was doctored in some manner. I mean, he has zero conscience, and he is a sociopath and a psychopath, and that's you don't want. Needless to say, you don't want somebody like that in charge of nuclear weapons or anything at all.
And what is remarkable is, George, there have been hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have interacted with him, and Republicans who have seen this again and again. And they, at some level, even if they don't have your acute eye for mental illness, know that he is.
They knew before I figured it out. Ted Cruz, in March or April of 2016, when it was right before he pulled out after the Indiana primary. He said, this man is a narcissist, the likes of which we have never seen in American politics.
Ted Cruz ever said that was dead on accurate.
Dead on accurate, and he said that. And then there are in a couple of the books, the post-Trump books that were written, apparently after Trump was elected, a donor friend of Paul Ryan's, who happened to be a physician in New York City, basically said, you need to read this about narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. And immediately Ryan got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
for this
they
reason,
all knew. And then remember, what Mitch McConnell said after the acquittal at the second impeachment trial in 2021. He basically said that Trump tried to basically destroy the country on the way out. Yeah. He got it.
Yep. And what people need to understand is this doesn't get better. That you break down, that you essentially, when in pressure, when you finally get caught, when the walls are closing in, you essentially crumble, because the attributes of this personality are you can never be wrong, you can never lose face, you can never admit error. So he is now at his worst, or getting
he's
towards
at his worst, and he's going to get worse. I mean, apparently, his lack of self-control after the Jean Carroll verdict has been just absolutely remarkable. And you see him; he's terrified that he's going to be indicted for the documents that he stole, the classified documents that he stole, and he deserves that, and he obstructed justice for that. That's going to come down the pike. We know Fani Willis is going to do something in the next month or two because he's basically battening down the courthouse down there. He's going to get worse, and that's what happens. Malignant narcissists get worse when they get cornered. And to me, I don't like, I'm always careful about, as we all should be, about Hitler analogies, but Hitler was the quintessential malignant narcissist. The term malignant narcissist was coined by a Jewish psychiatrist named Erich Fromm, who was trying to figure out what did these evil people like Hitler and Stalin, these tyrants have in common, and basically they're narcissistic sociopaths was the conclusion. And fortunately, Trump wasn't competent enough, and he didn't have he has a system that actually did check him. We never saw the worst that he could bring, although who knows if you ever somehow got elected again. But anyway, my point is, if you ever watch the movie Downfall, which is this amazing German language film, you see there are all these memes where you see Hitler ranting, and it's Bruno Ganz, the actor there, screaming at his generals, and then there's overlaid with something else.
And they've used it for a zillion different storylines. Very funny.
That movie, if you use the insanity of him when he was trapped there, where he's moving around armies that don't exist, and then saying, we will win victory, we will push back to the Urals or something, when basically, he's outnumbered 50-1 by the Russians, and the Russians are like 3 blocks away. He's spouting these insane things. This is the kind of craziness that we're seeing with Donald Trump right now. And he's what I think what psychiatrists would say is that he's probably decompensating. And that's the word that they use to describe someone whose, defense mechanisms are failing them. And he's going to get worse before he gets better. He's never going to get better.
We could go on for hours with this, George. We haven't even gotten to the details of other cases, so we're going to have you back on not too long from now to go through all the cases. But I think what this leads us to conclude is...
I hope I didn't talk too much on the wrong topics.
No, you were great. Is the American people might be excused for voting for this guy once. Twice was nuts, and 3 times would make them absolutely insane. And the fact that an entire political party is taking him seriously leads us to believe that they too have real issues.
Yeah, they have real issues. And the problem really, I think, and just from observing it both on an individual level and a collective level, is they don't want to admit they're wrong. They don't want to admit that they're wrong about Trump.
No sucker wants to admit that he was suckered.
And then with Trump, if you admit just one thing being true, one bad thing being true, all the others follow.
Exactly.
And the world that you've created, the fake world where Donald Trump is the innocent person, and everyone in the entire world, not just the 11 people at the Carroll trial, but all the people who are going to testify against him, who testified him at the January 6th hearings, and who are going to testify him at his criminal trials. You have to believe everybody's lying. The entire world is lying.
Exactly.
And it doesn't, at the end of the day, if you're actually a thinking person, it doesn't work. So what they do is they engage in incredible denial. They turn on Fox News, and Fox News is afraid to tell its viewers about what actually is happening. And they insulate themselves from the truth. And then it creates an incredible amount of cognitive dissonance where they just basically want to change the subject and go on the attack for crazy things that don't really matter compared to whether or not you have a commander-in-chief who's has a severe personality disorder and lacks mental stability and has the nuclear codes.
On that cheery note, I think we're going to have to wrap for today.
All right.
But we are in the business of not letting people live in denial, or at least disabusing Democrats, former Republicans, independents of the view that they can somehow persuade these people with the reason of another white paper or another loop of tape. But that's not going to happen.
I wish it were true. I mean, I was hoping that, when I wrote that article, people would say, oh, right. Now I get it.
Well, George Conway got it, even if many of us don't. So thank you, George, for being on our inaugural episode. And
appreciate you having me.
Please join us again.
Absolutely. All right.
And that's George Conway, a funny man, a big brain, who really gave us something to think about, not only about Donald Trump's mental condition, but that of an entire party living in denial. This is the sort of conversation I hope to bring you every week, talking about hard subjects, tough subjects, funny subjects. If you enjoyed the show, please tell your friends and remind them to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Bye-bye. We'll see you next week.